This is Santa Monica City Hall, and this is a dollar bill. Thanks, Palantir. And today, I'm here to lobby public officials to actively ruin your life. Lobbying. What is it? How is it? Who is it? And why is it? Lobbying just means communication in any form with a public official, whether indirectly or directly, in an attempt to influence public decision-making. And a lobbyist is someone who performs that communication, or at least that's what the International Standard for Lobbying Regulation defines it as. But you've never heard of them before, so they must not be right. So if you were to make a call to our beautiful Governor Gavin Newsom, he's a classist little. If he tries to pass some bill, are you considered a lobbyist because you're in communication with a public official regarding public decision making and you're trying to influence him? No, you're not, because it's a personal concern. In order to be considered a lobbyist, you need to be receiving compensation. Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks, Lockheed Martin. What was that? Sell my soul and go tell Gavin Newsom I love his new bill because they'll increase your profit margin? Okay, anything for the money. Hey, sweetie pie. Yeah. I'm just calling to say that your new bill is so great. And you should do whatever you can to pass it because it's so important to me and your constituents. It'll so increase your polling numbers. And everyone will love you, so keep that bill alive for me, okay? Aw, thanks, Gab. So much fun talking to you. Despite the joke I just made, you can't become a lobbyist without any qualifications. It's a big-time, serious job that requires a very specific type of person to become a lobbyist. Indeed, the best job finding website out there that will definitely get you a job says that in order to be a lobbyist, you should probably have a relevant degree in some boring topic like poli-sci, business, law, public relations, or social policy. Get an internship to make connections and be very good at influencing others. But the real secret to being a lobbyist is working in government. That's really how you make connections, and that's how people trust you. This is called being a revolver. Like a revolving door. Working in government mostly means being a government staffer, not an actual elected official. Editors know it's true that most lobbyists were not ever elected officials. However, in the House of Representatives, if you leave office and are eligible to become a lobbyist, 42% of representatives become registered lobbyists after they leave office. And for the Senate, for senators, that figure is 50%. So if you need a career after Congress, almost half of Congress people choose lobbying. A staffer is someone who assists the elected officials, which can be in a variety of ways from performing administrative tasks to drafting legislation itself. During this time, future lobbyists gain the trust and confidence of their elected officials, which they then use to their benefit after they leave their government position. Hey, Senator. Oh, my wonderful employee who I miss very dearly. What do you need from me, sweetheart? Well, actually, I wanted to talk to you about something really important. I got hired at Coca-Cola to be their new primetime lobbyist. You know how it is. And I just wanted to speak with you about that food health and safety bill that you're gonna vote on soon. Of course, anything for my favorite ex-employee. Have a seat and let's chat, huh? Okay, great. So basically, if you pass this bill, Coke will have to pay more taxes and cut down on their manufacturing. And that really hurts our bottom line, you know? And I know how much stock you have in us, and that would really hurt your profit margins too. It would hurt yours and ours at the same time. You probably already know all this, but because of our connection, they thought it would be pertinent to really secure your vote against this evil bill. Oh, you know me. I love insider trading, so you go tell the big Coke man upstairs that I'm going to vote against that silly old health and safety bill. The American people can continuously have worse quality food and beverages as long as we make a profit. They're too stupid after we took away funding for education to notice anyways. They'll vote for me for the 20th time during the election season, especially if I get those big dollars from your cute little corporation. Thank you so much, Senator Pelosi. Lobbyists benefit from these deals as much as the politicians do. It's a symbiotic relationship that sucks the life out of the American people, while letting corporations prosper. In fact, there is a predicted 18% increase in revenue attributed to lobbyists during her first year if they share these connections with an elected official, which just means that if a lobbyist is a revolver and has connections in government, they will get 18% more money in their first year than if they didn't have these connections. Now, not all lobbyists work for one specific corporation like Coke, which is called being an in-house lobbyist. There are also contract lobbyists who receive at least $2,000 compensation from a variety of companies, like, if you work for Palantir, Delta Airlines, and Meta at different times throughout the year, but you're not specifically employed by them full-time. But how does lobbying occur? What does it really look like? Lobbying doesn't always mean bursting into a senator's office and telling them what to do persuasively. There are two ways people lobby: direct or grassroots. Direct is what you think it is. It's when a lobbyist communicates with any government official or government employee who deals with the legislation process with the main purpose of influencing legislation. So when I call up Newsom or Nancy Pelosi and tell them to do a specific thing about a bill while being paid to do so, I'm participating in direct lobbying. Grassroots lobbying is a little bit different. It's when you try to sway public opinion in order to influence legislation. For this reason, grassroots lobbying can be often a lot less transparent and a lot less effective, as direct lobbying is. Under federal law, the Lobbying Disclosure Act of 1995, LDA, as amended, registrations and disclosures by professional lobbyists are triggered and related only to so-called direct lobbying contacts with government officials and those activities which support those direct contacts. Lobbyists aren't required to tell you when they do grassroots lobbying on a federal level, meaning they could influence how you think, how you act, and would be almost impossible to find them as the root cause. Sometimes they're nice and do disclose this information. However, a lot of grassroots lobbying goes unreported, hidden away from the public, because persuasion is a lot less effective when you know you're being manipulated. The public can't know that they are actively being swayed by corporate money. However, it's not all evil, because although there is little to basically zero regulation on grassroots lobbying on a federal level, there are restrictions on the state and local levels. For example, in our great state of California, an entity that does not have a lobbyist but spends more than $5,000 in a calendar quarter on grassroots lobbying may be required to file a disclosure report as a 5,000 filer from California Government Code 86115B. So in California, they do have to disclose what and where their money is going towards, even though they are not directly lobbying government officials or employees. So what is grassroots lobbying trying to do? It mostly attempts to get you involved, to get you to call representatives and send in those emails about the legislations the lobbyists want to influence. They mostly use advertising campaigns to get their message out, from newspapers to social media. Grassroots lobbying efforts could be closer to you than you realize.
Wait, what's your favorite restaurant?
Here's something that they want you to ignore. The government is trying to defund the aerospace and defense industry. We need to keep progressing towards the future. We need our country safe. We need to keep our foot in the door of aerospace. We need to lead the century as we have been destined. Hashtag stop sequestration. We need to keep our funding. Here's something that they want
messed
you to
up.
Hashtag stop sequestration campaign is not something I just made up for the bit like every other joke I've been in this video. No, it was a real grassroots lobbying campaign from 2011 to 2013. Yes, 2011 to 2013, back when I was 3 to 5 years old and TikTok didn't actually exist. The Aerospace Industries Association, AIA, launched a digital campaign called Second to None, designed to educate the public on how detrimental cuts to the aerospace and defense industry would be to the American economy. They spent around $2 million on this campaign. However, they never gave exact figures for the amount of money they spent because, well, they didn't have to. The AIA used social media to strategically target individuals on their Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook pages, using ads and unsponsored content to urge them into action. Almost 80,000 messages were sent to representatives in Congress by supporters of the AIA, a direct result of their grassroots lobbying campaign, urging Congress to prevent cuts to the aerospace and defense industry from going into place. However, this campaign, although it got into the minds of many people across the country, failed in its goal, and cuts to their industries did go into effect. So why does any of this really matter? How does lobbying actually affect your life? Laws hold up our entire society, government, and economy, and lobbying dictates those laws. So really, lobbying dictates your entire life. The will of corporations, labor unions, and nonprofit organizations fight to control you. Everything from the food you eat and the clothes you wear to the car you drive. It's all a direct result of lobbying. For example, in 2009, when a tax on sugary drinks was proposed, there was a spike in lobbying by the UPF sector, in particular sugary drink manufacturers and their peak body, the American Beverage Association, which itself spent more than $22 million lobbying that year. UPF lobbying expenses were likewise high between 2013 and 2015 when food companies opposed regulations for labeling of genetically modified foods. Lobbyists fight for and against what seems like every law regarding their specific industry to promote their best interest. That proposed tax on sugary drinks would have made companies pay in order to disincentivize the companies from producing as much and the American public from buying as much in order to promote a healthier lifestyle. But with the help of lobbyists, that tax remained proposed, leaving America to consistently have worse regulations on beverages to keep company profit margins high, even though the tax likely wouldn't have had a notable impact on the company's funds. Have you ever noticed that the American versions of products looks completely different to their European counterparts? Not in just marketing, but in the physical product. Take Fanta as an example. In America, it's an artificial, sugary orange soda that tastes delicious, but also nothing like actual oranges, and has this radioactive color to it. Now, this is what it looks like in Europe. It doesn't look like radioactive orange substance. It looks like watered down orange juice. Unfortunately for European regulators, it definitely doesn't taste as good as the American radioactive substance version. However, it's undoubtedly better for you. In Europe, the American version of Fanta is not sold because it uses synthetic dyes like yellow number 6 and red 40, which in Europe requires a warning label to be placed on the product due to potentially harmful effects on children. Instead of using these dyes in order to create Fanta's orange color, in most European countries they use actual orange juice. In American Fanta, there is no orange juice, despite it being called an orange soda. There is only high fructose corn syrup and dye. And it's not like the parent company of Fanta, Coca-Cola, and other companies in America aren't aware of the adverse effects their products have. Red 40 was discovered to have harmful effects on children's attention and focus back in 2007 with the Southampton study. 3 years later, the EU mandated warning labels on all products containing Red 40, but in America, still nothing of the sort. So why is the EU so much better at regulating harmful products than America is? Well, in the EU, any product that has the potential to be harmful is banned or restricted until proven safe. In America, it's the exact opposite. Products are allowed freely until they are proven to cause harm. So why is America innocent until proven guilty on product regulation? Lobbying. This idea in American regulation comes from the GRAS loophole, which first found in 1958 Food Additive Amendment, which allowed products to be put into circulation if they were generally considered to be safe, such as salt, vinegar, and other extremely common products. However, in 1997, the FDA introduced a new rule under the pressure of Congress and lobbying groups, which allowed companies to independently determine whether a product was generally recognized to be safe. The companies could do their own research and were no longer required to submit a review to the FDA or disclose the new ingredients in their products. This is because in the 90s there was a massive lobbying push from the pharmaceutical industry and the big food industry for deregulation action in order to streamline the FDA approval process. The consequence of which is the regulatory system we have today with the safe until proven harmful. Lobbying perpetuates corporate control, allowing their voices to be heard above that of the people, so that legislators focus on the good for corporations instead of the public good. Without lobbying, it's doubtful that these deregulatory laws like this would have been able to pass, because the officials who propose them have most often been lobbied by companies who would benefit from such a law. And without lobbying influence on other officials, there would be no one to vote in favor of these laws. So, lobbying actively corrodes our government by giving companies incentives to, in a way, pay off elected officials to get their way. It turns our government away from helping the people they claim to represent and towards the loving arms of massive corporations. From Red 40 to microplastics, American companies, given the choice, will always choose profit over people with the aid of lobbyists and our elected officials. In America, we actively fight against health initiatives, regulation, and taxes that would benefit the American people because companies are more important than us. So how is lobbying legal? How is it legal for a paid representative to go to their friend and tell them how to vote? How is it legal for companies to influence election campaigns? How is it legal for them to influence all of our laws? How is it corruption when an individual person or company gives money directly to a politician to fulfill their wishes, but it's not when a third-party lobbyist gets involved? Lobbying is legal because by determination of the Supreme Court, it's a form of petition and therefore protected by the First Amendment. But Alex, you might say, the First Amendment protects people's right to petition the government, not corporations. Well, again, according to the Supreme Court, corporations are simply groups of people, which means they can exercise their First Amendment right just as any singular person can. In America, corporations are people. This decision was created by the Supreme Court case Citizens United versus the FEC from 2010. There were two main court cases before Citizens that helped set the stage: Buckley versus Vallejo in 1976 and Austin versus Michigan State Chamber of Commerce in 1990. Buckley determined that campaign expenditures or money spent to influence voters is is a protected form of speech under the First Amendment and therefore cannot be restricted unless in cases of outright bribery. Austin held that limiting specific corporations' independent expenditures was constitutional and was not a violation of the First Amendment. Citizens challenged Austin's decision that prohibited corporations' independent expenditures being constitutional. Under the Austin decision, the Federal Election Campaign Act, which banned corporations from using their funds to communicate a message about identifiable federal candidates to the public on cable, satellite, or broadcast within 30 days of a primary or 60 days of an election, was constitutional. However, in 2008, Citizens United, a nonprofit corporation, wanted to pay cable companies to broadcast a film they had created about the then 2008 Democratic presidential primary candidate Hillary Clinton. They wanted to do this within 30 days of the primary, but worried about potential civil and criminal penalties. So they took it to the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia and argued that the ban was unconstitutional and that the disclosures on ads in the actual movie that they were required to do were also unconstitutional. The District Court denied this, and Citizens United took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court reconsidered their Austin decision and found that the rationale behind the decision was not strong enough. The Austin rationale was that corporations who, holding immense wealth, would have their voices amplified above the greater public in the political sphere, leading to corporations dictating politics rather than the people. However, the Supreme Court in the Citizens case found that this went against the open marketplace of ideas protected by the First Amendment, and that limiting speech based on wealth is limiting speech based on identity, which goes against the First Amendment. The court ruled that corporations have the same First Amendment rights as individuals do, meaning that they could spend as much money as they liked on political spending, because as long as it's not direct campaign funding, it's not inherently corrupt. Or at least it doesn't look inherently corrupt. Hey, so BlackRock made an entire ad campaign for you that increased your chances of winning this election by 34%. Oh wow, how generous of them. What does BlackRock like in a politician? I guess I'll have to throw them a boon when I'm in office. Oh, they like bombing children. Well, I already sold my soul, so it's a little immorality. This decision allowed for political spending to skyrocket, not just in lobbying, but also opened the floodgates for PACs, super PACs, and dark money. During the 2008 presidential campaign, total outside spending reached $574 million. Now, I want you to take a wild guess on how much outside spending there was for the 2024 presidential election. $4.5 billion. That's 9 times as much money spent in 2008. And this was because of Citizens United versus the FEC. It's downstream effects that allowed monies from PACs, super PACs, and dark money to infiltrate politics. That same year of Citizens in 2010, SpeechNow.org versus the FEC was ruled on in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. Based off the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens, which determined that independent expenditures are not a risk for corruption, therefore if a corporation only contributes to independent expenditures, the government does not have any anti-corruption interest in limiting their spending, and limits imposed by the FECA on such organizations was unconstitutional. Corporations which only contribute to independent expenditures are now referred to as super PACs. Super PACs are a form of political action committee, or PAC, which raises and spends money to influence elections, but for a super PAC, they can raise unlimited funds to spend independently from the candidate they endorse / hate. Unlike a regular PAC, who can only raise a set amount of money and can contribute directly to candidates, So a super PAC can make an ad like this.
Lights out.
Riots in the streets again tonight.
Police here are outnumbered.
The Democrat Congress and President Biden have made massive cuts to police.
Protesters now have entered a residential neighborhood.
Mom, what's that?
They'll defund police.
Stop!
They'll disarm you.
No!
Don't let this nightmare come true. Moms for Safe Neighborhoods is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So they're in a sense grassroots lobbying, getting the public to believe something or in order to influence the legislators. It's a dynamic duo which forces public servants to become servants of corporate America. People become government officials based on corporate money from PACs, super PACs, and 501c4s, which are basically like charities, but they're evil, and then those same corporations lobby them to persuade them into voting or writing legislation that promotes their best interest. Although there are a few politicians who refuse to take corporate money, it is unfortunately a very small minority of our government. The Integrity Index, which rates politicians on an A to F scale based on their financial integrity for both personal and campaign finances. A being zero to little corporate funding, with most coming from individual donations without trading individual stocks, and F being almost entirely corporate funded while trading individual stocks. Only 65 out of 523 Congress people listed on the website receive a grade higher than a C+. That's 12% of Congress. Only one politician in all of Congress received an A+ grade, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who received $0 from corporate PACs and holds no stocks. And only 15 Congress people received an A in general. The fiscal and general integrity of our democracy is basically non-existent because of corporations. Corporations determine everything about our politics, from who's elected to the laws they put in place. So is America a democracy? The American people don't think so. According to a Kettering Foundation Gallup survey of 20,000 Americans in July to August of 2025, only 25% believe our democracy is functioning moderately or very well. And only 25% believe that our government's decisions are made to support the public and represent our interests. As well, more than 40% of Americans believe that their leaders are not committed to a functioning democracy. Although 2/3 of Americans say that they prefer to live in a democracy above all other forms of government, we are not optimistic about our own democracy. It has become a semi-bipartisan issue, that of our failing democracy. I say semi-bipartisan because more Democrats on average were more likely to say that democracy is failing, and more Republicans on average were less likely. However, that doesn't mean most Republicans believe our democracy is working. At least one of the root causes for these beliefs about American democracy stems from lobbying and its echoing effects. Because lobbying has made our country a corporatocracy. It sounds dystopian, I know, but every piece of a dystopian novel is based off a snippet of reality. So what is a corporatocracy? How is America more aligned with it than a true democracy? Corporatocracy is defined as a society or system that is governed or controlled by a corporation. Shout out Oxford Dictionary. And I hope we all know what a democracy is. A government controlled and participated in by a whole population. To be specific, in America, we are supposed to have a representative democracy where people are elected by the population to represent their interests in political decision-making, laws, and policy. It's obvious how America could be a democracy, so how is it actually more in line with a corporatocracy? Well, when we break down each part of what constitutes our representative democracy, we find that corporate control is really what underscores it. More often than not, our elected officials have the fiscal and general integrity of wet socks. They are often sponsored and swayed by corporate money donated to them through PACs, super PACs, and 501c4s. They uplift corporate interests more than the interests of the public. In fact, Congress people are held up entirely by the support of businesses and the undereducation of the public. Because Congress has absolutely abysmal approval ratings, aka the proportion of the public who supports and agrees with their actions. Current U.S. President Donald Trump has an approval rating of 34%, one of the lowest approval ratings for a president in U.S. history. Now, the approval rating for Congress has been between 18 to 26%. The people do not and have not liked the work their elected officials do in Congress, yet they keep getting elected. Why? Corporate money and the incumbency effect. Incumbents are elected officials up for re-election. Around 95% of the time, they win their bid for re-election. This is because people like to distinguish their representative from the rest of Congress. People like to think that their congressperson is different. Everyone else in Congress is corrupt, and that's why Congress as a whole has horrible approval ratings. But their representative is different. Their representative is fighting within a broken system that everyone else is participating in. And the majority of the population thinks like this. So everyone thinks their representative is special. Hence why the same Congress people keep getting reelected, despite popular disapproval of the institution. The corporate money donated to these incumbents by corporations and lobbyists too help perpetuate the system. The funds help them have significant financial advantages. Large amounts of money equals large winnings because it means they have the opportunity to advertise, speak to voters, and get their name out there even more. For corporations and lobbyists, incumbents are a safe bet, so they donate to them more than their challengers because they believe the incumbents will win easier. During the 2022 Senate elections, on average, incumbents raised $2.8 million, while their challengers only raised $308,000. This is a cycle that feeds into itself. Donors give money to incumbents who they believe stand a better chance at winning their election, while incumbents have a better chance of winning because of the donations they receive. Corporate money keeps our politics the same. Corporations control our legislators. Once our corporate-backed officials are in office, it's not as though they get rid of their corporate ties. No, instead, a lot of legislation that is proposed, voted on, and put into law/blocked holds corporate interests at their core. That's not to say all legislation is done with corporations in mind. However, a significant portion is, and their influence is found in bills regarding every sector. As well, a lot of legislation masquerades as beneficial for the public when it's really only beneficial for corporations and the 1%, decidedly not the majority of Americans. For example, Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and a lot of what Trump's claim is his purpose in government is to help with the affordability crisis and uplift poverty-stricken communities across the country, bring back a real America. However, this act is anything of the sort. Instead, it cuts the social safety net such as food assistance, Medicare, child tax credit, and federal student loans and grants, to name a few. And the money taken from these vital safety nets will be given to corporations and the ultra-wealthy to fund tax cuts for them, allowing them to contribute even less to our society than before. Millions of people across the nation will soon lose access to healthcare, food, and education, only worsening our financial crisis.
Yeah, that's right. Good evening. These cuts to Medicaid could impact the health care for hundreds of thousands of people.
This bill makes the obscenely rich, the oligarchs, even richer.
More than 200,000 households in Connecticut rely on SNAP benefits.
And that cuts to Medicaid would be devastating to not only the facility and its residents, but jeopardizing operations and access to care.
Currently, about 36 million Americans receive this help buying groceries. As William Brangham now reports, the administration argues this change will save billions of dollars by removing millions of people from the food stamp rolls.
Meanwhile, corporations and the ultra-wealthy get richer. With tax cuts and tax breaks, they get to live the easy life while everyone else in our country suffers the consequences. And do you know who lobbied for this bill? Companies like Alphabet, Google and all that, Apple, Amazon, Meta, Tesla, Lockheed Martin, AT&T, British Petroleum, General Motors, FedEx, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, and more spent combined millions upon millions of dollars to get this bill passed. These corporations never cared about the public health and well-being. It's only about capital. Corporations push this bill through our Congress with the help of our corrupt politicians, leading the American people to suffer the consequences of their own greed. And you may say, but so many Americans supported this act. How is it created by corporations? Because Americans are constantly manipulated by corporations and the ultra-wealthy to vote against their own self-interest through culture war issues and their own lack of education. We don't fund education for a reason, because a stupid population is much easier to control than an educated one. Why do you think professors and researchers are always among the first to be targeted? So our laws are dictated by corporations, and our politicians are dictated by corporations, and the people are manipulated by corporations. The public interest is not represented in our government. It's just corporations. Our country is one controlled by corporations. Our country is a corporatocracy. As much as I've made it seem like lobbying is pure societal evil, there has been good which has come out of it. The concept of lobbying basically removes the public from the equation of democracy, essentially removing democracy from itself. However, corporations are not the only groups which lobby. Some groups use lobbying in order to benefit the people, to put democracy back into the equation. Labor unions, nonprofits, and ideological groups often lobby for things like improvement in civil rights, gay rights, nature conservation, and education. These groups often use lobbying as an actual democratic process in which they actively represent the interests of the people. However, a vast majority of lobbying interest still comes from corporations and businesses who use it to push the law in their favor rather than the favor of public interest. So, why do people support lobbying, aside from the minuscule amount of good that could come out of ideological lobbying? Well, proponents of lobbying claim it actually expands the voice of voters, because lobbying allows access to elected officials on a scale that an individual cannot achieve. Lobbying supposedly allows an educated expert in a field to represent the interests of large groups of people. These educated experts are the lobbyists, who can bring attention to issues that lawmakers might not have been aware of, that are important to their constituents. But there is one massive issue with this thinking, because under the law, corporations are considered groups of people. So when lobbying supporters say lobbying helps represent the interests of groups of people, oftentimes this simply means lobbying represents the interests of corporations, which are legally considered people. Lobbying on a general level helps businesses and corporations more than any other group of people, because they are the ones who have enough funds to lobby. It's often left out in arguments about lobbying about the money necessary in order to lobby in the first place. You need to be paying someone at least $2,000 for them to be considered a lobbyist. So obviously the average individual in America who lives paycheck to paycheck, that amount of money cannot be thrown out in order to get their point heard by an elected official. And because of our loneliness crisis in America, most people are not involved in organizations or clubs where they could aggregate this amount of money. For most small businesses, too, they cannot throw out that amount of money, leaving only big businesses, corporations, and entire industries' labor unions with enough money to lobby. So truly, how does lobbying expand the voice of the average voters when the only ones who can afford to lobby are massive corporations who only represent their interests? How do they bring up issues to legislators that the population cares about when they only care about their bottom line? And why must there be a pay threshold to have an honest conversation about an important issue with legislators? Why are lobbyists afforded so much time with elected officials, greater time than those officials' own goddamn constituents? It all comes down to money, connections, and education. Something common people can't afford, but it shouldn't be like this. There shouldn't be an economic barrier between elected officials and their constituents. Elected officials signed up to represent their constituents. So how is it that those officials never hear the voices of those they represent? How can we call ourselves a bastion of democracy and freedom if the only people who can afford those principles are rich? Democracy is supposed to represent all of us, a government by the many, not by the few. But our government is rule of the few, without real input from the many. unfettered, late-stage capitalism has corroded our democracy entirely, and it's time we do something about it. So how do we fix this? To be frank, I don't have a proper solution. Every time I come to think about what we could do about the state of American democracy, about the issue of lobbying and corporate control, all I can think of is wildly impossible solutions that would never happen in the state of our government. I say overturn Citizens United versus the FEC. I say overturn SpeechNow.org versus FEC. I say impose term limits on Congress people. I say create an amendment that says corporations are not people. I say require all political financial groups, if they must exist, to disclose every last dollar they receive and where they put that money towards, and impose a limit on how much corporations and individuals are allowed to donate. I say ban revolvers from becoming lobbyists. I say recognize lobbying as an appearance of corruption. I say ban lobbying and make elected officials more accessible to the public. However, the majority of our politicians are funded by corporations and are led by corporations. They will never vote to dismantle this system or even recognize it. So for the time being, the best bet we truly have to combat all the issues that come with lobbying within the system is find those few politicians who are not bought by corporate money. There must be more Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes in our government. We must, as a collective and individual, show up for them, donate to them, support them, not blindingly or without criticism of their actions, but we need the political status quo to realize that people won't vote for corporate-bought candidates. We need to get to the point in our politics where every congressperson can be given an A on the Fiscal Integrity Index, where our politicians represent our interests and not the interests of corporations. Show up for the politicians who support the people and demand change. Use your inalienable rights enshrined in our Constitution to petition the government yourself. Maybe even become one of those politicians with integrity yourself, or work outside the system and organize the proletariat into revolution and topple our current government and capitalism. Whatever you prefer, there's always hope for change.
This is a dollar bill, and this is Santa Monica City Hall, and I'm here to bribe public officials into banning lobbying. They're closed on Sundays, so I won't actually be doing any of that.